The President of the United States takes off his lapel microphone, throws it on the floor, stands up, and leaves in the middle of the interview. The cameras are still rolling. The host is still speaking, but the chair across from her is already empty. And the first thought that all the major networks will present to you today will sound like this. So you see, he couldn't handle the truth. See, he ran away. Not with Obama, not with Biden, not with Bush. It started exactly when one specific person took the seat, and today we'll figure out why. But to understand yesterday, we need to rewind 8 years back. November 2018. The East Room of the White House, a press conference. CNN correspondent Jim Acosta gets the microphone, and he doesn't give it back. The president says, "Well, that's enough, thank you," but he keeps going and going. A White House staffer reaches out to him for the microphone. Standard procedure. That's what they do here. You ask your question. Next, give the microphone to the next person, but Acosta doesn't give it back. He pushes the young woman's hand away, keeps talking over the president, talking, interrupting, talking. Remember this image. This isn't a tough question. It's not an uncomfortable topic. It's a physical refusal to yield the floor. A reporter who acts as if the room belongs to him, and the president, he's just an annoying obstacle. An annoying obstacle. Now, honestly, imagine for a second if any correspondent in the room had done the same thing with Obama. He wouldn't have surrendered the microphone or waved off a staff member. He would have interrupted, spoken over Obama. What would have happened to that journalist by the evening? His colleagues would have been the first to drum him out of the profession. You would have called him a disgrace to the field. But here, Jim Acosta is a hero. A martyr. Columns were devoted to him. Stories were made about him. Because he didn't do this with just any president. He did this with this president. And that means, by the new rules, anything goes. Open season. Next. 4 years merged into one continuous buzz. Briefings where people don't ask questions, they just shout over each other. Dozens of voices at once. Not, "Mr. President, how do you comment on the remarks?" But with questions where every question mark is just cover for an accusation. A tone that isn't even used with defendants. Faces that show not curiosity but anger and hatred. And a verdict delivered in advance. And again, compare. Remember the briefings from the previous 8 years. Remember questions like, "Mr. President, what has amazed you most during your presidency?" I'm not making this up. That's the real genre of that era. Back then, the press knew how to gush, admire, and let people finish speaking. So where did all that go? Nowhere. It just became selective. Respect for the position stopped being given to the position. It started being given to the person. I like this person in this position, but I don't like that person in this position, so I'll do everything I can. Case in point, May 2020. The height of the pandemic. A briefing in the Rose Garden. CBS correspondent Wei Jiajiang, that's Wei Jiajiang, if I'm pronouncing her Chinese surname correctly, asks a question. It's related to China. The president responds in general, rather sharply, and moves on to the next journalist, but the next one is Caitlin Collins from CNN. She does something that never happened with other presidents in the room. The president is already giving the floor to someone else. She grabs the microphone and says, "The question has been asked." There. And if he didn't hear it, she'll ask it one more time. "No, thank you, Mr. President. No, you can't clarify, and I decide who gets to speak here." And at that moment, what happens is what they'll later show as Trump running away. He calmly finishes the briefing, and he leaves absolutely calmly. The next morning's headlines say the president couldn't handle it. Not a single headline about how 2 female journalists turned the press conference into a tug-of-war over the microphone. But it's the same thing as with Acosta, right? First provoke, then film how the person reacts, and only show you the second half. Now, in October 2020, there was a town hall. Town hall is a kind of format, an intimate format. People gather, everyone sits around. Ordinary people sometimes ask the president difficult questions. The host is Savannah Guthrie from NBC, and now the warm format turns into an attempt to attack right before our eyes. She interrupts, she presses, She asks a question, and without listening to the answer, she asks the next question on top of it. The president himself later said that she acted as if she had jumped out of her chair, the way she fired off questions, as if she was charging into battle on horseback. Her colleagues in the field were thrilled the next morning. Oh, she got him. Like very few people can. I mean, what a tough little mutt. And now an honest question. Have you ever, even once, in the 8 years before Trump, seen a town hall host press the previous president like that? Interrupting, not letting them finish, arguing with every answer? No, you haven't seen that. Because it was a friendly format. For some, it's friendly, but for this one, it's an interrogation. The same chair, the same studio, different rules, depending on the last name. October 2060 Minutes. A respected program, the legendary Leslie Stahl. The president sits for about 40-45 minutes and then leaves. He doesn't even return for the staged walk he was supposed to record with the vice president. And here's the most important detail that few people noticed at the time. After leaving, he did something no one before him had done. He posted the full unedited recording. He said, "See for yourselves. Don't trust the editing, trust your eyes." He knew exactly what they would do. That's why his people were filming. Think about what that means. A man who had been accused for years of being a liar, an enemy of the truth, a deceiver. In response to the accusation, he reveals the truth. Raw, in full, uncut. And his opponents who say, "We're for facts, we're for fact-checking," show us a montage, a snippet, an edit. Who do you think is hiding from the full picture here? The one who gave you all the footage, or the one who kept some in the editing room and gave you a version? That's the pattern. Not a single scandal, not a single hot-headed politician, but a stable recurring pattern year after year. One set of rules for one person, and a different set for everyone else. That's how much they're afraid of him. That's how much they hate him. And yesterday, that pattern just got another stroke added to it. And before we move on to what that host said about him before the interview, and why did she even come at all? Leave a like if you noticed it too. If you've seen the same thing I have all these years, you were told it was only your imagination. Knowing there are many of us matters to me. And we're heading toward the climax. Now it's Meet the Press, NBC, host Kristen Walker. The same one who moderated the debates back in 2020 and did it terribly, awfully, but from their point of view, from the point of view of progressive libtards. Amazing. And that's because she was by no means independent. So to speak, not independent at all. Oh, so to speak, dishonest, not impartial. She was fighting for her own side. And before we see how it all ended, let's see how it all began, because you can't understand the ending without the beginning. So, let's think about it. What was her position even before the first question? Right? I'll give you 3 options. First, to help Trump, second, to be neutral, and third, to go against Trump. Take a guess. The interview lasted almost, 50 minutes? Just like on 60 Minutes, right? And for all 50 minutes, it wasn't a conversation. It was an interrogation. Topic after topic. She wasn't asking, she was challenging, not tell me, but you have no evidence. Not, what do you mean, but that's not true. You see, those are different things. Do you have any evidence, or is it a lie? Let's break it down point by point. What exactly was being discussed? Because that's really the crux of it. First, fund against the weaponization of the state. $1.8 billion. The president wants to compensate people who, in his opinion, were persecuted for years by the machinery of the state. By the way, I've thought about this many times. Because, well, let's say the state comes after you. Then in the end, it turns out everything is fine. You manage to fight them off. But bam, $200,000, $300,000, $500,000. You don't have it. They targeted you solely for political reasons, which you can prove. So what? Should I go get another $500,000 to pay for it? No. Here's what Trump suggests. Guys, there's a fund you can turn to, and if they see that it's all true, they'll reimburse your expenses. This is, mind you, a fundamental issue. It's about whether the authorities can persecute a citizen and get away with it. You should have asked, who do you see as the victims? That's a normal, legitimate question. How is all this going to work? Won't it just be passed on to their own people? Where are the boundaries? Well, that's reasonable, right? Instead of a substantive conversation, there's pressure. Are you seriously pushing this? Hold on a second. Something serious. Really serious. Yes, I am seriously pushing this. Let's talk about why this is necessary. No. Are you seriously pushing this? And why might her audience, the people who watch her, be interested in this and not in what I just mentioned? January 2nd and 6th. The president gave his version, saying that some of the people in the building were brought in by agents themselves. Well, again, I saw footage myself that my friends filmed. It's a controversial version, I agree. So to speak, there is nothing there. None of what we would call evidence, right? Although there seems to be video that confirms it, but there was no evidence in court. Look at the host's reaction, not, show the evidence, let's sort it out. Repeatedly, like a hammer blow, you have no evidence, you have no evidence, you have no evidence.
У вас нет доказательств. У вас нет доказательств.
This is an invitation to a conversation. This is an interview. This is a verdict repeated so that the viewer remembers. Exactly, you have no evidence, you have no evidence. And the third drop generation, California. The elections on Tuesday, which he called his fantasy battle for fantasy blood. And here Welker dug in hard. Prove it, prove it, prove it. He didn't provide any evidence. He called NBC a one-sided and corrupt network. He took off his microphone and said what all the headlines are now repeating, I've had enough. So why did she come? For the truth or for his head? That's the question behind all of this, and I won't give you an easy answer. I'll give you a tool so you can answer for yourself. Because our channel isn't about believing me, it's about learning to see. Ask yourself this. Is the goal the truth? How does a person who is searching behave? He asks a question and listens to the answer. He lets others finish speaking, asks clarifying questions, and is equally critical of anyone before him, president, former president, or janitor. His toughness is consistent across the board. It doesn't depend on the name of the person in the chair, or it could be the exact opposite. If the target is him, not the truth, then the question becomes a trap. Then they don't listen to the answer. They wait for it to catch him. That's when the strictness kicks in. For some, it kicks in, and for others, it switches off completely. Then the main thing is not to hear. To provoke some kind of scandal, even just a little, even a small one, not information, the moment, that very shot where he stands up and leaves, the shot that will be played on air for a week, the one that will get millions of views, the one that will make someone's career. I'm not speaking for you. I'm just asking, what do you think was more important? There you go. The networks. Studios, broadcasts, the president's response or his walkout. And why did she keep doing that all the time? She was provoking. From my point of view, again, you can decide whatever you want. And who benefits more from this walkout? Him, who has now once again run away from questions, or her, who now has the most talked about broadcast of the year? When you learn to ask this question, whether a person is searching for the truth or looking for a head to roll, you will stop being a spectator in someone else's show. You will become the one who sees the stage from above. And believe me, that's a completely different perspective. It's an entirely different picture, and now as promised from the start. I said, they didn't behave like this with other presidents. And I have to not just state this, but show why it happened this way. Without a reason, it's just an emotion. With a reason, it's a lesson. It's not that previous presidents were better or more honest. It's not that previous journalists were more noble. It's about one quiet shift, which happened and turned the whole profession upside down. Previously, a journalist considered it their job to ask questions. Now, a significant part of the profession considers it their job to deliver a verdict. These are two completely different professions under the same name. The first one serves you, it brings you information, and you judge for yourself. The second one serves itself. It already knows the verdict and only comes so that you confirm it. That is, you believe them, that the verdict is exactly as they made it up before the show even started. And this is what happens when the second profession meets a person that is already decided is guilty. The question stops being a question, the microphone stops being a microphone, it becomes a sledgehammer, a club, a hammer. The studio stops being a studio, they have already decided who is guilty. The question has been reconsidered. The prosecutor, the jury, and the judge are all the same person, and that person is looking at the defendant. With previous presidents, such a meeting like this, has never happened. It didn't happen because they were saints, but because they were already treated as one of their own. And their own are not judged, their own are not touched, their own are praised, their own are given some kind of achievement. Your achievement impressed you the most, and now the other side of the same coin, the most important one. We say this president was pressured like no one else. However, without the mirror image side of the truth, the picture remains incomplete, because the question is actually twofold. Not only how they attacked one person, but also what they did when someone dared to attack another. This is where the most instructive part begins. When criticism was directed at their own people, they didn't analyze it. They called it a hostile operation. Well, that same year, in October 2020, the story about Hunter Biden's laptop comes out. They could have simply done what the profession teaches: check it. Is the disk authentic or not? Whose emails are these? What's in them? Instead, 51 former high-ranking intelligence officials sign a letter about this story, all the classic signs of a Russian information operation. What does that mean? Nobody knows. And a huge part of the press happily picks up the headline, "It's Russia, case closed, I guess it's forbidden." And then quietly, years later, it comes to light. The laptop was authentic. The FBI knew this back in 2019. There was no Russian operation, but no apologies. We didn't hear any, because the purpose of the letter wasn't to find the truth. The purpose was to put a label on it before the elections. With one label, you don't have to deal with inconvenient truth. It's Russia. It became a catch-all excuse. Anything that reflected badly on their own side was written off. Everything that hit their own was blamed on Moscow. See the difference? They would go to one person with a magnifying glass, prove every word, will interrupt you at every breath. But any similar truth for another person, they didn't even try to check. They would just declare it foreign propaganda and immediately turn away. And when you showed it, they would largely despise you for not being a member of their circle. That's the double standard in all its nakedness. For one, it's a magnifying glass and a hammer. For another, it's an umbrella and the word Russia. And the most brazen thing here isn't even the bias. The most brazen thing is the attitude. Those who interrupted, who labeled, who stuck tags, who closed topics, all this time called themselves defenders of facts, guardians of truth, the ones without whom you, the ignorant, would drown in lies. Ask yourself, how can someone who approaches one person with a magnifying glass and shields themselves from another with an umbrella dare to call themselves a guardian of truth? These are all enemies. That's not a guardian, that's a lawyer dressed up as a judge, and he put on that disguise at your expense. To judge with your hands while seeming to have nothing to do with it. It's not about a single episode here. Remember the general tone of those years. The reporter shouting across the hall isn't asking a question, but hurling an accusation. Why do you keep lying? So you just won't recommend that contradiction, which is a ready-made verdict thrown in your face, on camera. Now imagine putting the former president and the same reporter with the same shout in that situation. You can't, right? You can't, no, because that never happened. The shout, "Why are you lying?" was meant for only one person. With everyone else, those same people spoke in a voice used to lull someone to sleep. "Sweetie, darling, honey." When you put all this together, the snatched microphone from Acosta, someone else's microphone from Collins, the pressing Gautry, the shout, "Why are you lying?" And then immediately they kindly held out an umbrella, and this is Russia, over everything that's inconvenient for their own side. You stop seeing individual scandals. You see one machine with one superstructure, strictness for one, tenderness for another. But what about the truth, you may ask? The truth? Truth is not a goal, but rather a bargaining chip. And today we are learning to recognize this chip, and here is why this concerns us personally. Us, those who came here from countries where the press has been for decades. Not the watchdog of democracy, but rather a lapdog of the authorities. We know this. We know what journalism looks like when the verdict is written before the question. That's why we came here, to avoid seeing that again. Milton wrote almost 400 years ago, Areopagitica, Areopagitica. Let truth and falsehood grapple. Let them meet in an honest fight. And who has ever seen truth lose? But pay attention to the word fair. The fight must be fair, and fair means the same rules for both sides. The moment one person is judged by one set of rules and another by a different set, the fight stops being fair. It stops searching for the truth. It starts producing a predetermined result. And it doesn't matter who you like in office. Today the rules are unfair. The rules work against him. Tomorrow they'll work against the one you love. Your double standard doesn't have favorites forever. It only has a target for today. That's why this isn't news about Trump. It's news about whether the profession will survive at all. Which once was our only shield against power, it was called the Fourth Estate. When the watchdog starts barking at people by name instead of at what they've done, it stops being a watchdog. It becomes a weapon. And a weapon is always in someone's hands. And the hands of these gentlemen, I want to say right away, are not yours. I promised that there would be light in this difficult story. There is, and it is stronger than it seems. Here is the light. That very move. Releasing the entire tape is not a coincidence, it's the future. Because for the first time in 100 years, technology has taken away the main power of the editing room, the power to show only snippets in whatever order they want. Today, a person leaving the studio can upload the full recording in 10 minutes, and millions watch the raw truth bypassing the middlemen. That wall between you and reality, which for decades was held up by a handful of editors, has started to crack. And those cracks, well, you can't patch them up so they're no longer visible. Before, to judge who was right, you would be given an edited version. You had to trust the person holding the scissors. Today, we can watch everything in full, ourselves, and decide for ourselves. That's what real fact-checking is, not when a stranger tells you, this is the truth. When they give you the whole tape and say, judge for yourself. You're an adult. Do you know what that changes? It puts the judgment back in our hands. Not the host, not the networks, not the one who shouts the loudest at the briefing. Us, you and me. But the person who has been given back the right to judge can't be pushed back into the room where the verdict is written in advance. He has already found this door. He won't close it. So when they show you this shot for the 100th time, an empty chair, an abandoned microphone, the rain, and they'll say that he ran away from the truth, do one simple thing: don't believe them. Find the full recording, watch all 50 minutes, and ask yourself, what did we learn today? Was the man across from him looking for answers or looking for a head to roll? And secondly, could you withstand what Trump is going through when you learn to ask this question every time about any host, any network, any country? You can't be fooled by edited clips anymore. Not here, not there. Where we came from, I mean. And a free person who can't be deceived is, well, probably the strongest wall that freedom has ever built. Are you stronger than the editorial team? And you are the ones building this wall. Right when you watch for yourselves. And you don't draw conclusions based on someone else's words or broadcasts. The river of truth never dries up. You can block it with an edit, but not for long. Sooner or later, it finds a crack. And today there are more cracks than there are dams. That's probably the best news. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Every day, about half an hour of news and sober analysis. For those who want to understand, not just get angry. And if you're one of those who likes to get to the root of things, on our second channel, Roadmap to Freedom, twice a week we dig into the roots themselves. How to tell a question from a verdict. How to tell the search for truth from a witch hunt. And why a free press isn't the one that barks the loudest, but the one that barks for a reason. Let it bark. Let it bark for a reason, not according to a list made in advance. It's a skill. A skill. The main shield of a free person. Use it, and come to us to learn more about how to use it. See you. And always watch the whole tape yourself, not just pieces of it.